For the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. 1 year ago today, we saw a bunch of angry Trump supporters, evangelical white Christians, lots of the white supremacy crowd. Well, we saw the MAGA hats out in full force in our nation's capital, violence, attacking our capital. And over the last year, what have we seen? A rewriting of that history. And I spent a little time today going back, thinking about the run up to that day and how the day before I said, look, there's chaos coming. And how on that day, I went back and actually pulled a couple of clips of exactly what I thought of the day. And it hasn't changed. The reality is we are exactly where I said we were back a year ago today, and I don't think anything's changed. Here's one of the clips from my opening a year ago. Remember the good old days when Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin were as crazy as the Republicans came? Remember the good old days when, well, at least there was some humor in their insanity? Well, today, what we saw today in our nation's capital is the manifestation of decades of right-wing nuttery, of a Republican Party that has been flirting and dancing with the devil, only to now have its soul ripped from its chest. And I'm sorry, I have absolutely no patience in this moment to hear from any Republican right now how they condemn violence and how they don't agree with what's going on. They've been courting this for decades. And I stand by that because it's who the party has become. This was all predictable. It was all predicted. And it's who they are now. There's no easy way back for the Republican Party. And today, their actions today, and we'll get into some of that, their actions today showed that. But, it's more than just, the Republicans. It's Trump. And until Trump is held accountable, I don't think anything really changes. But this is what I had to say a year ago about Donald Trump. I'm Rick Smith. Wrong one there. And I don't want to give Donald Trump too much credit. This is the problem I have. Because if you were shocked by what happened today in our nation's capital, if you were shocked by this armed invasion of our nation's capital, if this surprised you, you haven't been paying attention. If this is something that you go, oh my gosh, this is horrible, you haven't been listening to Donald Trump. This is what he's been saying he's been wanting for the entire 4 years. And it is. And then I went into this one, in my final clip here that I wanted to play. And today he came out in much the Trumpian fashion. Right at the very beginning of his little video that he put out, he said, I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. And you go, wait a second. You're supposed to be tapping down the invasion. Unless you want an insurrection, unless this is part of the bigger plan, unless this is part of the plan to declare martial law and then go to plan B. And that it was. And now, look, we didn't know all the things we know now. We assumed, we thought we knew, all the evidence was there. It was clear. Now we're seeing the memos. Now we're seeing the places where they put their treason. And this is where I talked about this yesterday. The fact that we need immediately to get to the bottom of this. This should have been much further down the road. These hearings should have been happening already. Politically, there should be more accountability. On the Merrick Garland front, I want this to move faster. It needs to move faster, but it needs to move at the speed it needs to move to hold people accountable. But here's the thing. There have been 725, 750 people who've been arrested, but none of them are the people who really matter in all this. Those 725, 750, they're all dupes. They're all the nitwits who organize we're gonna do what Donald wanted us to do. They're not the moneyed interests. They're not the people who funded this. They're not the people who were behind the scenes manipulating this stuff. And they're certainly not the people in the power positions. This was the result of years of planning. It was. This stuff has been gamed out in think tanks. That's what they do. And it was what it was. It was a coup attempt. There is no other way of looking at it. Now, I spent some time, interestingly enough, listening and consuming right-wing media today, and all they could do was, well, talk about anything else, deflect. Oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. Oh, the George Floyd thing. Everybody else is to blame. My favorite argument came from one of the Limbaugh replacements, who said, well, there may have been some people who, wanted to overthrow the government, but they didn't really have the opportunity. Yeah, they did. There is a plan. Maybe you've read the memo that was in the hands of the person who held the highest office in the land. There was a plan. So this argument of, well, they may have wanted to, doesn't hold water. Now, like I said, I started my day off consuming some right-wing media. But I got an email from George from Florida. George. George. Yes, a man from Florida. He's not fond of my commentary yesterday on January 6th, and in his way, put that to words. A lot of misspellings, but I'm going to get through it. He writes, I watched your demented tirade about January 6th. The gathering in D.C. and cannot believe you are going to lie with a straight face about what happened. January 6th was nothing more than a family day of patriots exercising their God-given constitutional rights of free speech and to redress their government of grievances of a clearly stolen election. The evidence is all there, and then he sends me several links to angry YouTube people screaming and ranting and raving. I would put them out on social media, but I got to be honest, I'm not going to promote this kind of kookery. Just not going to do it. They're out there. You can find it. He goes on to say, facts you missed. Now, of course, I've edited the parts where there were lots of name calling and you get the picture. He says, facts you missed. The peaceful protesters were there to merely protest a rigged election. They did not storm the Capitol. They were invited in by the Capitol Police. That's a narrative I like hearing. They went through metal detectors, so we know they were completely unarmed. There was violence that day, but here it comes. Wait for it. It was Antifa and the FBI. So Antifa and the FBI are getting together. He says this was a false flag if there ever was one. Clearly, no one in this matter matters to you because you're a big fat liar. And you had to get that in there, and I left that in there because George needs that. If he truly believes, and I think this is just trolling. We've had George call our program a couple of times and troll from Florida. And this is one of those things where you go, anyone who looked at what happened on January 6th, honestly and truthfully, what you saw were people who were there with the intent of stopping the certification of the election. That was their stated goal. That was the whole point of that rally, was to stop. And you had 147 Republican representatives who were on board with that. They didn't want to certify the election. They wanted to stop it. That was the intent of the day. So anyone who says no, it was a show of having our voice. It was a show of patriotism. It was a family day. It was a picnic day. It was us getting all dressed up in our costumes and running around. It was not that. That was not the intent. And if you were there for that, you evidently went to the wrong party. This was all about stopping an election from being certified. This was about stealing the vote from we the people and pushing it in a direction that would be advantageous for Trump. We see this in the writings, and we knew it at the time because he had already floated the idea of it sending it to Congress and Congress having more Republican states than Democratic states and him being able to stay in power. That was always the plan B. Plan A, of course, was to ensure that secretaries of states in a handful of states overturned those elections and fined 12,000 votes to keep him in power so he can say he won the election, even though he lost by well over 7 million votes. And again, none of this stuff matters to the right-wing kooks, and I spend way too much time debating with them and talking to them, but this is what the reality is. These folks believe that the election was stolen because they keep hearing it over and over and over again from Donald Trump and the right-wing media in this country, who get to hide behind freedom of the press when they lie. And that's part of the problem. And look, I'm not saying we change our rules, but we be better consumers. Just my thought. Now, the president gave a speech today. I thought he gave a very powerful speech. I think it was one of his better public speaking moments. I'm not a fan of putting him in front of the microphone for extended periods of time. But I thought he did a good job. He pointed out that Donald Trump lost the election 5 times, which I thought was good. I thought it was important that he pointed out that he's not just a former president, he's a defeated former president. I thought that was a good shot, because at some point you've got to go after these people on their grounds. And I thought the speech was very powerful. I thought it was one that said, hey, look, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to hold people accountable. And I think it reassured some people like me who are going, this is taking too long. I fear this ends up like all of the other crimes of the past by anyone. I think back to the Reagan era. I think back to the end of the Bush era. I think back to all the Wall Street banksters that got away with their crimes because nobody went back and held them accountable. This gives me a little bit of hope that, you know what, we're going to go after this because this was different. And I think the president hit it when he said, look, for the first time in our history, a president has not just lost an election. He tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol. But they failed. They failed. And yes, they failed this time. And again, I look at today and I keep coming back to, with all of the craziness that's going on, the Republican Party, if you notice today, was nowhere to be seen. There were 2 Republicans at the House of Representatives, Liz Cheney and her father. Dick Cheney, going, when did the soul, when did the savior, when did the hope of the Republic go back to a Cheney? But Cheney said that he was deeply disappointed. We don't have better leadership in the Republican Party to restore the Constitution. That's coming from Dick Cheney on the day where no Republicans showed up to any of the things. And in fact, the people on the radio were mocking the fact that there was going to be a candlelight vigil. Now, these are the people who thoughts and prayers, candlelight vigil for everything. And yet this, an assault on our nation, that's mock-worthy. It's quite Republican, isn't it? Especially given the fact that Matt Gaetz, and this is where we're going. You have Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was on the podcast of Steve Bannon. He said, we're ashamed of nothing. We're proud of the work we did on January 6th, and we're actually going to walk the grounds that patriotic Americans walked from the White House to the Capitol. It's no longer in their view, and this is one of the mouthpieces of the Republican Party. It's no longer that it was a bad thing. They no longer shy away from taking credit for what they did on this day a year ago. And that's because they've done a really great job of spinning the narrative and holding to the big lie. At no point did you hear any apologies, because it's not what they do. The thing Republicans do masterfully is they never apologize when they do something wrong. They double down on what they did wrong as if it was absolutely as right as right could be. And I look at Gaetz's comment. That is going to gain more steam in the coming weeks and months. That is going to be the mainstream Republican view going forward. While the president has stepped forward and said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Merrick Garland yesterday said we're going to use the power of the Department of Justice to ensure that people are held accountable. Republicans are going to go the complete opposite direction. And they're going to go we did nothing wrong. It was a patriotic day that we're proud of. They're proud of the fact that a Confederate flag got inside our Capitol. They're proud of the fact that police officers were stabbed with American flags. They're proud of that because that is who they are. They are the party of, they don't care about democracy. They don't care about anything unless they win. And if they lose, I mean, this is the ultimate in sore loser. If they lose, then it's burn the house down. But that's not new. None of this is new. This is who they've always been. The difference is they've never had someone with the courage of a Matt Gaetz. And yep, I'm going there. Someone with the courage of Matt Gaetz to step forward and say, you know what? I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care if it's treason. I don't care if it's sedition. I don't care if it's an insurrection. I'm doubling down. I did it. I did the right thing. This is what you're going to see going forward. And this is scary. Also, what we find out today, Stephanie Grisham, former White House press secretary, told CNN that Donald Trump was watching gleefully, saying, look at all those people fighting for me. He was gleeful. He wanted this to happen. And are you surprised by it? No, there's no surprise here. And anybody who was surprised, anybody who sits and goes, I can't believe that happened, clearly have not paying attention the last 30 years. And I love what Republicans have been doing here recently. Now turning the table, saying, well, this is all Democrats. Democrats are just blowing this out of proportion so they can use it. They can exploit it for political gain. And you go, really? This was a coup attempt. This is 232 years of peaceful transfers of power. This was a legacy that you cannot get back. This was the soul of what made this republic great. And they sought to destroy it. We got to hold them accountable. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send me an email, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Like I said, I do answer all the decent ones, even a couple of crazies like George from Florida. Thanks, George. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Taking on climate change. This is our moment to get it right. And here's how we do it. By putting the American auto worker on the job. Building the electric cars and trucks that take us where we need to go without the pollution that's warming the planet. The cars we love, the trucks we depend on, all made right here in America by union auto workers. More electric vehicles. That's how we build a clean energy future. That's how we take on climate change.
It takes a lot to raise a family. A good job, a good salary, and some patience. A lot of people my age are drowning in college debt. But I chose a different path. I'm a member of the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I work hard for my job, and I love what I do. I had a lot of choices for my future, but I made the best choice for my family. IBEW, the right choice.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the news came out today. Evidently, on this day a year ago, remember the story that they found a pipe bomb at the DNC? Yeah, the people who were just out there for a picnic, the good God-fearing Christian patriots who were just there for redress of grievance, who were just there to show signs of support, the unarmed masses with the pipe bombs at the DNC. Evidently, we now find out that Vice President-elect at the time, current Vice President Kamala Harris, was actually in the building, which kind of gives you some questions of, how bad could this have gotten if they were a little more competent? Lots of questions here to share some thoughts on that. I've asked Amar Musa to come talk with us. Amar is a rapid response director at the Democratic National Committee. Amar, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So this revelation that that Kamala Harris was in the building, this is kind of a big thing to hold on to for a year, don't you think?
Well, I wasn't at the DNC at the time. It started in March, but obviously, like you touched on, it was a really scary day, and for a lot of different reasons. And the fact that there were thousands of people who were trapezing through the Capitol and promising to hang Nancy Pelosi and smearing feces on the wall. It was a really, really terrifying day, and it's just a reminder of how close we were to so much danger. And to your point, if maybe they were a little bit more competent, it would have been worse. But all of this has been enabled by Donald Trump and today's Republican Party.
Yeah, but come on, Amar. I mean, as George from Florida emailed me, they were just peaceful protesters there to merely protest a rigged election. They were allowed into the Capitol by police. They went through metal detectors. They stayed through the velvet ropes. It was a peaceful day. Come on, what are you talking about?
Peaceful day. I think one Republican congressman called it nothing more than a bunch of tourists coming through the Capitol. It is genuinely terrifying again, this happened because Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and every single Republican leader enabled and encouraged it.
Yep.
And it speaks to how morally bankrupt the Republican Party is today.
And I'm glad you put it that way, because everyone focuses on Trump and everyone wants to give Trump credit for the Republican Party going completely off the rails. But this is who they've been for a very long time. This has been the party of fascism, and you can run away from that if you want to. But this has been the corporate party. This has been the party of the people instead of we the people for a very long time. This is just finally their coming out. And I point to Matt Gaetz' statement that they're proud of what they did. They're going to march it again. They're going to do this again. They're taking ownership of it as it was. Just another patriotic day.
I mean, again, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene's press conference today, I think, to put it nicely, was unhinged. And for them to continue, this is who Kevin McCarthy protects in his caucus. He protects Marjorie Taylor Greene. Kevin McCarthy earlier this week was asking his members to defend Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think this is today's Republican Party, and full of extremists. And that's what's at stake in these elections in 2022. If every pundit in DC wants to talk about how Republicans have it in the bag, but I think Americans are pretty clear-eyed about what's on the other side of this. If Republicans take power, you're looking at Ted Cruz, who promised yesterday that if Republicans take power, they're going to impeach Joe Biden, justified or not. That is the quote.
Right.
The Republican Party is full of extremists, and they've let it fester for not just through Donald Trump presidency, but longer. And, it's January 6th was just the beginning of what is truly, truly possible for this scary party.
No, I said yesterday, they say, it was a failed coup attempt. And I asked the question, was it really a failed attempt? They failed to keep Donald Trump in office now. But I don't believe it's over. I think they're still building. The moneyed interests are still funding these underground groups, the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and the Oath Keepers and all these crazy right-wing fringe Christian white supremacist idiotic groups. They're still doing their thing underground. I'm hoping the FBI and everybody else are doing their jobs, but they're still organizing. They're just doing it not as public as they had been over the last 4 years.
Absolutely. And they're underground groups, but let's be honest about what the Republican Party elected officials are doing right now at the state level, where at state houses across the country, they are laying the groundwork to overturn an election. And that's why Democrats are fighting so hard to protect voting rights and to fight back on these Republican attempts. Not only are they looking at like extremists with, big guns and assault weapons, but we're also talking about Republican members at state houses who are doing everything in their power to subvert the vote and to set the groundwork for, overturning the will of the people.
Yeah. Now, here's one of my knocks against the Democrats at this point. I said on January 6th, 2021, let the hearings begin now. I think we're way too far away from the event now. I know they're talking about hearings in April, May, maybe. Which again, I think way too far away. This is stuff that has to get out there. The messaging has to be these people committed crimes that are so egregious. So they strike so at the heart of our democracy that they can't wait, that we can't put this stuff off. It is that important. Because all I heard today on right-wing radio is, but the George Floyd protesters, they did damage. That's not the same. These people wanted to take down our democracy. They wanted to end 230 plus years of peaceful transfers of power, and they almost succeeded.
They did, but they did not, because let's remember about frankly, the heroes who took a beating to protect the Capitol, to protect the members of Congress, and to protect the staff. I have friends who were in the building that day. And so I think that Democrats are focused on highlighting these, to hold people accountable. I think we heard a very powerful speech from Merrick Garland yesterday, where it is a methodical process. I think what the select committee is doing today and for the last few months is amassing this evidence to create this airtight case for the people who are responsible and to hold them accountable.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, Amar. I do. I understand. I understand the DOJ's got to do its job. Airtight cases, you want that for the courtroom. But the political part of this is we need perp walks. We need people who are going to be held accountable. There needs to, a guest the other day brought it up. And he said, look, no one's really been held accountable. On January 6th, 2021, those folks got to walk out of there and go home. And in that, they got to take that message and spin it to where they did nothing wrong. They were patriots. And now you got Matt freaking Gaetz going, hey, I'm proud of what we did. That's insane to me.
It is incredibly frustrating, but to see Matt Gaetz be able to pretend that like nothing happened, for Ron Johnson to sweep it under the rug. But I think I have all of the faith in the world in Joe Biden's Justice Department and in the select committee to hold these people accountable, and to hold them accountable to make sure the American public knows what's going on. And I think it is a long process.
No, and to that vein, I look at today's speech by President Biden, which I think was probably the most powerful speech of his presidency thus far. I'm generally not a fan of him giving long speeches because, he's not Barack Obama. He's not Bill Clinton. He struggles a little bit. I thought today he was on point. I thought today he was powerful. I thought the words were powerful because it did send that message. Donald Trump lost. He said it 5 times. And we're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to save democracy, and we're not going to allow the people who would hold a dagger to the throat of democracy to win. And I thought that was powerful.
Well, I fully agree with you. I think today's speech was probably one of, if not the best speech that President Biden has given to date. I think that it was powerful, and my favorite line is, Donald Trump isn't just a former president; he's a defeated former president. And like to your point about messaging and making this case to the American public, it is important to remember that today every single broadcast network, and including Fox News and OAN and Newsmax, carried Joe Biden's speech today. This was a message that was every person on the spectrum that was watching today saw this speech, this very, very powerful speech that was a blunt message.
Yep.
And a message of we have to be better than this. And Donald Trump lost, and his lies are hurting our country.
No, and are you surprised? Let me ask you this first. Are you surprised that so few Republicans showed up today. I mean, you would think that this was a national day to remember the people who were who died on that day, the number of people who were harmed on that day. Are you surprised that only 2 Republicans showed up at the House, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney? I mean,
I think it speaks to the moral bankruptcy of today's Republican Party. I mean, like, let's remember Kevin McCarthy stood on the House floor a week after January 6th last year and bluntly said that Donald Trump was responsible, and then flew down to Mar-a-Lago 2 weeks later to kiss the ring. You know, everybody remembers Lindsey Graham's speech where he says, "Count me out," and then is playing golf with him less than 3 weeks later. This is today's Republican Party, blindly loyal to the guy who had cost them the House, cost them the Senate, cost them the White House, and cost our country dearly beyond, like, there is no way to put into words. And so, no, this is the Republican Party that is desperate to gaslight in America that January 6th didn't happen and we didn't enable it. But the Republican Party is responsible for it, and as, of course, Donald Trump.
I can't believe how soulless they are. I mean, I think of Ted Cruz. You'd have called my wife ugly, and we'd be rolling around on the ground. I would definitely not be kissing your ring. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Amar Mosa. He is the Rapid Response Director over at the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, dnc.org, the website, if you want to check out the stuff that they've got there. But, Amar, going forward, I've said for a while we need to get that Build Back Better plan done. That needed to be done last year. We need the voting stuff done. We need that done immediately because, we can be right. And this is the problem I have with Democrats. You're right, but we don't fight enough. We don't ball up the digits. We don't get in there and throw the punches. We're in a moment right now where I think if we don't get this voting rights bill passed through, we don't get the John Lewis bill or even the freedom to vote bill pushed through, I think 22 is over, and I think 24 is gone as well because the Republicans have already done the work, man. They're putting in the work to put the roadblocks up in every state. They're figuring out how to rig the next elections. The steel is already in unless Democrats move on these voter bills. So how are you gonna get that pushed through?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature, but even beyond that, I think what we know is I think voting rights and delivering on voting rights is a priority, if not the top priority for the administration right now. And that's why you're going to see President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris fly down to Georgia, which is ground zero for the Republican war on voting rights. And you're going to hear them deliver a speech. And I think the president and vice president are all in on fighting Republican efforts and delivering on a voting rights package. And so it is a priority for the White House, and it's a priority for the DNC. And let me be very clear: like, the DNC is not waiting for Congress to pass legislation. The DNC is already aggressively on the ground in battleground states across the country. I think we're spending upwards of $30 million to register voters, to educate voters, to hire lawyers who are going to protect people's right to vote. That is, like, the DNC is in this fight and has been in this fight earlier than ever before. So the White House and President Biden and Kamala Harris are going to go to the mat to fight for voting rights, but the DNC is not waiting for Congress. We are going to continue to protect people's right to vote, and we're going to get in the mud for this.
So if I'm hearing you right, I'm thinking of an article that Rand Paul had tweeted out a couple of days ago, that American Conservative article about what happened in Wisconsin. You're talking about stealing the next election then. You're going to get out there and register voters. You're going to talk about issues. You're going to encourage the people to vote. You're going to give them issues to vote for. So you're really talking about stealing, in Republican language, you're talking about stealing the next election.
I think Rand Paul's really struggled to convince people that he's been right, and so he's forgotten what it takes to win an election. But what it takes to win an election, and what Democrats have proven, is talking about the issues, talking about what matters to people, knocking on doors, registering people, and that is what we're going to be doing. So, Rand Paul needs to get his definition straight.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we need to get people access to the ballot box because, in all seriousness, and we've kind of joked around a little bit on this day. The reality is if there's a roadblock in front of our ballot box, and I don't care who it's for, I don't care who you vote for, who you support, any obstruction to our ability to cast a ballot to participate in this wonderful experiment of self-governance is a destruction of the legacy of this country and cannot be tolerated.
Absolutely. Like I said, the DNC is not resting on its laurels. We're in this fight. We're going to protect people's right to vote, regardless of where you are on the spectrum. That is also really important. Whether you vote for Republicans or Democrats or an independent, whatever, the DNC is fighting for people's right to vote. And we're going to do that in 2022. We're going to do that in 2023, and we're going to do it in 2024. We're going to continue to do that. And it is so personal to Chairman Jamie Harrison, and this is not the time to not the time to rest.
No, and that's the thing. Out of today, what is the message going forward coming out of the DNC? I mean, obviously today was about remembering the people who lost their lives, the people who were harmed on this day, and remembering what almost happened, and being grateful that our institution held. That a handful of Republicans in states didn't pull off the crimes that the administration had asked for. That we had a Dan Quayle to convince Mike Pence not to do what he was being asked to do. What's the message coming out of this then?
I think tomorrow we're going to, tomorrow and every day after, we're going to be reminding voters not only how Democrats are delivering, how we're going to deliver tax cuts for the middle class, how we're going to put money in pockets of middle class families. We're going to also remind people what is on the other side and what Republicans stand for. Yep. And that is extremism and this loyalty to Donald Trump and this blind fealty to big corporations and the wealthy and lining their pockets, right? And we talk about, one of the biggest policy debates that are happening right now are Republicans going to the mat to protect their trillions of dollars of giveaways.
There you go. That is the message going forward. Amara, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff. Hope you'll come back real soon.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
It's the end of a hard year for America. People are tired, worn down, worried. That's the truth. The damage Trump did to our economy, to our families, and our place in the world can't be undone overnight. It takes time. It takes leadership. It takes work. President Joe Biden is doing the work. He's not promising TV miracles. He's delivering results. COVID vaccinations, saving lives, an economy getting back into gear. Facing the tough problems, not with drama, but with competence, decency, hope. It doesn't mean we don't have hard work ahead, but Americans aren't scared of hard work. And neither is Joe Biden.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, I'm still stuck on this Matt Gaetz comment. Just mind-blowing. But again, this is where the current Republican Party is. This is definitely not the party of Lincoln. This isn't the party of Eisenhower. It's not the party of Reagan even. Not even George W. Bush. This is an extreme party. When you got Matt Gaetz, who says of a year ago today, we're ashamed of nothing. We're proud of the work we did on January 6th, and we're actually going to walk the grounds that patriotic Americans walked from the White House to the Capitol. Proud of it. They're proud of what happened. That is stunning. And here to share some thoughts on, well, is this the Republican Party today? I've asked Reed Galen to come talk with us. Reed is co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Reed, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
So I'm looking at this comment, and I've been thinking about this most of the day, because this was, in my view, if you'd asked me a year ago what my thoughts of the future is, this was going to be it. They were eventually going to take ownership of it, because this is what Republicans do very well. They never apologize, they never back up, and they always, if they were wrong, they were double right wrong.
No, you listen, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that listen, even when I was a Republican, you know, any sort of apology was, you know, with the exception of something truly egregious, you didn't apologize. You just drove on, right? Now what I think you see is that they relish this stuff, right? They relish the transgressive behavior and language. And I think also, Rick, they tell you what they're going to do. Like Green and Gates, they believe in this stuff. A lot of Republican candidates believe in this stuff. Is this the Republican Party of today? It is. When 68% of self-identified Republican voters believe that Donald Trump had the election stolen from him and therefore Joe Biden is an illegitimate president, that is the position of the Republican Party.
So, you said a second ago, it's one of the reasons you left the party. You were a former Republican and a right. Republican operative, really high up there. How did the party get away from you? How did you guys get to this point? I mean, you know, I have my views, but I'm curious from your perspective. You know, how did you get here?
You know, it's a good question, and I don't know that it only has one answer. I think there was a confluence of things. One is that I think the two parties started moving apart ideologically and geographically, frankly, and demographically. The Republican voters became increasingly white with this weird spread between the working class and the ultra wealthy. And you know, the Democratic Party moved out to the coasts, became far more diverse. The difference, of course, is that the Republican Party had always had a pretty nasty racial tinge to it. That burst out into the open. If you think back to Mitt Romney being the Republican nominee in 2012, that was the end of it. And I think also you think back even to 2012, 2010, the Tea Party. We saw what was coming, but none of us, we all thought, oh, these are the people who we've always said, you know what, like, we hear you, we know you're here, you're sort of noisy, but you got no place else to go, right? We didn't understand that they would capture the party.
Yeah, the Buchanan wing, if you will. Because I remember back in the, you know, Molly Ivins,
sure.
She's passed.
I was there at that speech. I was on the floor of the Astrodome for that speech.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You know, that, you know, this is
Sounded
who they
better
are.
in the original German.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the thing is that both political parties have always had their noisy activist wing. That was just what it was. Right. But the noisy activists tended to get just enough to keep them happy. And they stayed in line. I think we've already seen with the Republican Party that the activists, the inmates eventually overtook the asylum. And I think you see now amongst the Democrats that the progressive wing is unwilling to sit quietly for the things they believe in. I don't think it'll turn out the way it did for the Republican Party, admittedly. But I think that it just, you know, we took a lot of things for granted. I think that it became, you know, the party of big business and, you know, tax cuts, tried to pawn people off with, you know, judges and those sorts of things. And ultimately, the party was hollowed out ideologically because it became about power and money and nothing else.
Is there any way back?
Ironically enough, it's still just power and money.
Yeah, is there any way back to, do you see them coming between the curbs at some point or is, you know, all of the punditry saying, oh, we're headed for violence in the streets, there's going to be a civil war, there's all of that talk of chaos. Do you think that's where we're headed?
I don't know yet. How does it come back? The Republican Party will have to be burnt down and reformed. As it currently stands, it is an anti-democratic authoritarian movement led by very, very bad people who have very, very bad intentions, which, as I noted earlier, they absolutely share with every one of us. They have to lose electorally badly in 2022, 2024, and probably 26 and 28 until finally somebody's going to say, I'd rather win than, you know, have Democrats take over everything.
But isn't that where they are now? I mean, you talk to the average Republican voter. And I know a lot of them because I'm in a very Republican area. Sure. They may not like what Trump has done. They may be a little uncomfortable with, you know, with the riot, with the insurrection. They may, you know, not want policemen killed, and they may not want to see that kind of stuff. But they're still going to vote for the Republican because, well, the Democrats are evil incarnate, and that's been a great, a great line for right-wing media who, honestly and truthfully, they dominate talk radio, they dominate cable news. they're the message machine that has created this monster.
Well, listen, I completely agree with you. The right-wing radical rage machine, for lack of a better way to put it, drives the political narrative in this country today. You can say that, oh, there's CNN and there's MSNBC and the New York Times, but the truth is that whatever Tucker Carlson wants to talk about is probably going to get picked up by major, what we used to think of as mainstream media outlets. They'll cover it straight. There's this weird and really unfortunate, dual equivalency that somehow just because you quoted a Democrat, you must quote a Republican, even if the Republican's just going to lie to your face or make something up. It's a dangerous thing. And what you said earlier with someone like Gates, they can say anything and they can lie about everything because they don't care, right? All they care about is winning. All they care about is ensuring that their people are as fired up as they can. Do I think that violence is upon us? I think we will see violence. I don't think we're going to know where or when. There is a whole bunch of kindling in the form of 20 or 30 million Americans who believe that they truly believe in the sort of worst Trumpist Steve Bannon stuff, and all they need is a spark.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping we get through this year, and I'm hoping we get through every year without that.
Yeah, because I look at some of the, I think of the Richmond. Back when Trump was president, there was that rally at the Richmond. They called it a rally for the Second Amendment, but you saw all those people showing up with their guns, and to me, it seemed like a military operation and more of a scare tactic, saying, "Look what we can muster up.
Sure.
You literally cannot stop us." And then, of course, what we saw on January 6th. For me, I said that thing in Richmond was just the precursor to what could have happened on January 6th.
No, I think you're right. I mean, and I mean, I think we should also understand, too, that, Trump didn't just overtake the Republican Party and make it his own. He also created an umbrella movement of very unsavory characters, militia types, those sorts of folks who never had a place anywhere in mainstream politics and thankfully for it, or even really mainstream society. He gave those people a home within his orbit, within the Republican Party, and now they stand on street corners with AR-15s. Some of them utilize those AR-15s, as we saw in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And they absolutely do it on purpose. They absolutely do it to menace people, to say, yes, we will employ violence if necessary. We saw that one of those Turning Point USA things that Charlie Kirk guy put on. Well, a guy asked a question, when are we gonna stop putting up with this, and when are we gonna start killing people?
Yeah, and that's not just there. That's come out a number of times. When we get in the guns, and look, I know people like that. I know people who they've got guns and rice buried all over central Pennsylvania. They've told me because they're ready for the next Civil War because they think that they're going to, I don't know, change the outcome of the original one, which is twisted. But there are people who they seem to want this kind of chaos, and I got to understand why. Is it because their lives didn't turn out as they were told they could have been? They were going to be, chieftains of industry and captains or this or that, and they turned out to be the guy who goes, "You want fries with that?" I don't know, but that kind of anger seems steeped in something, and I'm trying to put my hands on exactly what it is.
I mean, I think part of it, is this idea of, especially in the middle of the country, right, amongst the guys you're talking about. I think that they probably feel culturally put down. I think they probably feel like that the elitists on the coasts make fun of them, which they probably do, to be honest with you. And there's a resentment to that. Does that mean that they somehow didn't get the life they wanted? No, but I think that, and again, you probably know these guys better than I do. I think they have been made to feel, or have been allowed to feel, like because of where they're from or what it is they do, that there's not enough inherent value in who they are as a person, which of course lets someone like a Donald Trump really fire those people up. It's this loss of I was in charge and now I'm not, a way of life. They're coming, right? This is all very normal language for ideologues who are trying to pit one group over another. We saw that in Yugoslavia 30 years ago, where, the Serbs are saying, look at all these people coming in, they're changing our way of life, it's our country, how come they come in, they, and what happens is, and I think, Rick, on the violence front, it's very dangerous, because what happens is an individual becomes not a subject an individual, but they become an object. Them, they, it. They're the enemy. And I think that's where it gets pretty dangerous.
No, and that is the fear, and you're absolutely right on that. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Reed Galen. Reed's the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. You can follow them on Twitter at Project Lincoln. I look at this moment, and I really am trying to reach some of my Republican friends. Because I think in order to do what you've said has to happen, the Republican Party has to find themselves, and maybe that's a couple elections down the line. It's still the voters. It's still the people who are still pulling those levers. And if they're being constantly bombarded with the kind of other talk, they're the problem that we see on Fox News, that we see in talk radio. All I heard today on talk radio was Antifa, the George Floyd protest. That's where they focus their attention. And as long as the red meat, the outrage candy, what I call it, is being fed to these people, I don't know that this taps down.
No, I think you're right. Again, and all of that is deflection and projection, right? It wasn't us, it was them. Let's not talk about an insurrection at the Capitol. Let's talk about, and when they say, the BLM protest, what they're saying is black people burning buildings down in cities, right? That's what, they're not even using coded language anymore, right? There's this sort of thing. It's like, oh, they keep saying the quiet part out loud. No, they're saying it all out loud. There's no quiet part anymore. Yeah. They're willing to say anything. And look, Rick, there's been no sanction for them. Legally, politically, socially, none of it, right? Financially, no one other than the 700 or 800 people who stormed the Capitol have been held to account in any way for this. And, unless somebody gets off the schneid in a hurry, a lot of people probably won't ever deal with, suffer for it. It's all well and good to have a congressional committee saying, here's this thing that you did, but as last time I checked, it's the executive branch that prosecutes people federally. It's not Congress. And so, I hope that, Attorney General Garland means it when they're going to take something seriously. I hope that, President Biden give a very forceful, I thought, necessary speech at the Capitol today. I hope he means it. But there's got to be consequences. There's that famous trope, right? A coup unpunished is practice, and we can't let them practice again.
No, you're absolutely right. And so let me get your thoughts on today's speech. I thought it was probably the best speech of his presidency. I'm generally not somebody, if I were one of his handlers, not putting him out for a 25-minute speech. But I thought he did really well today, and I thought the words were powerful, and I thought he delivered it well.
I think so, and I think he needed, it was the speech he needed to give. And I think it was the speech he needed to give, not only for the country writ large, but frankly for his party. Because as you know, Democrats want to win. They want to feel good about how they win. They want to be thought of as the good guys and the white hats. But as you know, Rick, in a fight, if you stand there with your hands by your side while the other guy punches you in the stomach and the face, you're going to lose most of the time.
Yeah, well, my comment on Democrats has always been when a fight breaks out, they'll be the ones to hold your coat. And I'm hoping this, to your point, I'm hoping this was that moment where they throw your coat on the ground and they join in. Right.
Well, listen, we don't hold many people's coats, and I don't believe that you do either. But I'll say this: is I think that the pulse you have on those folks in places like central Pennsylvania, I think is hugely important. I think there are votes for Democratic candidates in those areas. I really do.
And this is where we'll probably disagree on things. I think the issues are as important as the rhetoric. As a union guy, as a working class guy, I think Democrats have to find their roots in those worlds and promote good, sound labor law reform, make people's lives better, be the party of the working class, the FDR era. And we may disagree on that, but I think that's where they
listen,
go.
I'll say this. I spent 10 years in California, so every union you can think of kicked the you-know-what out of me one time or another, right? But I would say you're absolutely right. When it comes to the building trades, when it comes to the Teamsters, when it comes to the private sector unions, I 100% agree. I think you see, I was talking to somebody about this today, the idea that you've got a guy like Jeff Bezos who only worries about going on rich people's yachts and shooting rockets into space when he's got a facility collapse in the midst of a tornado and he can't even be troubled to say something about it. I think we've clearly crossed some sort of Rubicon when it comes to how we deal with employees who are working their tails off, who aren't able to go to the bathroom. This is not Like, this is not the early 1900s, right? Like with a Triangle Shirt Company. Like, that's, is that what it's going to take? We're going to have to lose 700 people in some awful fire before we sort of wake up and say we can't treat human beings like that. And so I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that Democrats shouldn't be timid about stuff like that. Because I think that the white working class has moved away, culturally part of it, but also because they saw unions disappearing and not a lot of people fighting for them.
Yeah. And look, I've said this, as the Democrats were Republican light. That's when things started to split into parts. And I think they need to get that back. And look, I would love if there were pro-union Republicans again. I'm old enough to remember where there were some. I would like to see that back again and some soul back to the party. But Reed, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Appreciate your thoughts as always. Good stuff.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Make sure you check out the work that they do on Twitter at Project Lincoln. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.